It's really great to have you all here. Apparently interested in social economy science, the publication of the book, and foremost, I would think our excellent panel. So we're going to have two parts of this evening. Me and Marike giving a short introduction on the book, on some of the contents, but then, and we've already done a little video earlier with Emmanuel up there, who's also filming the event, saying that essentially this book is meant to be a platform for policy action, for practical action, and for real change towards sustainability transformations, both in relation to environmental issues, but also in relation to social issues. I just want to feed you briefly in on the book. I promise I'll be short. I also have brought you one slide, which is going to, amaze you and puzzle you, and you will think, the guy's going to talk about theory or something. I'm not. I just use it as a bit of an anchor for you to understand what we mean by social economy and social economy science. So the background of this event goes back quite a few years. We were doing an event together with the European Commission in the context of the European Social Economy Summit, where the Commission also had an interest in promoting science and research on this topic. And with social economy, we essentially mean two different things. One thing, well, they are not different things, they are connected things, but there's a traditional strand of associations, values-based organizations, cooperatives, and these kinds of organizations. But then you have also newer trends in what we see as the social economy, which is that we have things like social enterprises, social tech startups, meaning startups that are using technology in order to address issues of racial justice, inclusion and exclusion, and these kinds of issue areas. We have impact investing. We have Christina later, who is working in this area where we're trying to invest money for impact rather than only with impact. Impact being something that you do alongside responsible action, but not really engaging with the social and environmental problems that we have. And we see this as, a relatively broad and open area and emergent area that is becoming more important, right? So maybe briefly I should just mention ourselves, myself and Marike, who's contributed a chapter. And as you know, this is a joint event between ESCP and HEC Paris, which I think is also great. We had a pre-discussion before the panel, and then really noting that it is a bit of an oddity and a really great thing that this discussion is happening at a business school, which we couldn't have, I think, imagined maybe even 5 years ago, certainly not 10 years ago. And that's also the idea here, that we're trying to amplify some attention, but also real practical action on social economy, because especially in the context of the COVID crisis, we have seen that social relations, things like mutual respect and the work of organizations that are tackling really, persistent social and environmental challenges is essential to actually, make some progress in society. And that's one of the few positive effects, I would say, of the crisis, right? Now comes my, this is going to be the sledgehammer slide, which is one of the, key, I think, conceptual, in the end, we're still academics, conceptual anchors that we have in relation to the social economy. But I'm not going to talk for an hour, okay? I'm just going to highlight a few things. One thing being that the social economy for us is really, first of all, an amorphous field, and I think that's a good thing, because we have some areas, as I was saying, impact measurement, impact investing, things like social procurement that are really at this intersection. We also have an area of discourses that are going beyond that, and for good reasons. For instance, the focus on impact is quite different from how we think about, ESG reporting, for example, which is a lot of a risk tool, but not really focusing on value creation for society, right? So this is the character of the social economy. And sometimes you hear, well, why should we care about the social economy? It's so small. It doesn't really contribute that much to the GDP, which isn't true, by the way. But I think what's really important to us is that you have those, this flood of errors moving towards other areas, towards those that are quite rigid, right? Towards the mainstream economy, towards policy and public administration and how they are composed as of now. And through these, transformation pathways, innovation for impact, agents of change, but also partnerships, active partnerships with private and public actors, we think the social economy is really a transformational force. And you have some theory in sustainability transition saying this usually happens when you have, economic forces, when you have a crisis, when you have economic opportunities coming in, when you have technology becoming old and then the new one somehow breaks through. I think what's different in the social economy is that it's really proactively trying to use those pathways to effectuate change. And that brings us to the right-hand side of the graph, reconfigure fields and make them more open and more inclusive and more transformational. So much for the background. We have a number of great practitioner scholars and scholar practitioners who are contributing chapters to the book with a wide range of topics. And Marike is one of the contributors with a chapter that is focusing on innovation, but in a different way than we usually think about.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. So thanks again for being with us. So I'm going to use my time to just talk a little bit about that chapter number 4 that's in the book. There's many chapters, but this is the one I wanted to talk to you about. So, and as Georgie said, I want to talk about a different kind of innovation. So I think when we think about innovation, we typically think about innovation that happens, and this is me drawing, that happens inside a company, right? It's in the R&D labs. It's sort of teams working together, being incentivized to discover, typically giving a bit of slack. So, basically there's some time for failure, and then hopefully once an invention occurs, the researchers are being incentivized. They will be rewarded. Okay, so they will be rewarded money-wise, okay, but also patent-wise, right? So that's the kind of traditional thing about innovation. Traditional innovation, the benefits can be reaped individually. We can create organizations that incentivize researchers to search and develop. Now, where I want to take you is this different kind of innovation, which I term innovations for the public good. So notice here that this is the kind of innovation that doesn't really happen inside the walls of an organization. It's basically people, it can be people, or it can be organizations, who voluntarily contribute their time to discover, to search for solutions. So, you see some guys there, they have their torch, they are looking for a solution, and if they find a solution to an important societal problem, the benefits will be to all. Okay, so that's in the sense there's a real, notice how not everybody is searching. Some people can just free ride on the efforts of those who search. So it's very interesting, this kind of voluntary search that is decentralized, and actually where the bulk of the benefit is not private. It cannot be appropriated privately. So the bulk of the benefit is to society at all, at large. And that's the kind of innovation where I think we need more of. Okay, so that's the next slide where I say urgency is now. So, and in the chapter, this is the kind of innovation I expand on, is to sort of, first of all, try to convince you that this is the sort of innovation we need on more. So those black people, so we can think of them as citizens. They can be your neighbors, okay? And so the question might be, are we going to sort of put some time and effort to figure out how we can make our neighborhood more friendly, more, what can we do to improve the integration of refugees and immigrants in our neighborhoods, in our communities, okay? So that could be, actually we don't quite know how to do this well. So we need to search for approaches. I know some of you actually work in this area, but actually there's no blueprint approach, and given the size of the phenomenon, that we are facing, we better, step up and start searching for more and more approaches. We haven't, this is a big problem, but this is a problem where all of you can actually, decide to sort of start spending time and searching for something that could be meaningful, let's say for your neighborhood. But we can also think about elderly or senior people. They also can start, they might ask themselves, okay, maybe I've retired early, so I actually still have a lot of energy and time and resources and skill sets. How can I make that available? That's a real challenge. Actually, that's going to be a growing challenge with the aging of society. We'll need our elderly people to actually, we'll need to take care of them, but also they have something to contribute. And so, again, we don't quite know what this could look like, but we need people to sort of voluntarily start searching for solutions. So this is, again, sort of another example, of voluntary efforts of, in this case, in this example, seniors who start looking for ways of how they can contribute to a more inclusive society. But also teachers. I mean, well, many of us are professors, or maybe some of you are teaching in other primary, secondary school. We know that, inclusion of people who have difficulties learning or people with disabilities is tremendously difficult. I mean, ask any teacher. It's a true struggle of how to do this. And so, again, this is a topic that is actually of true importance to society, but where we need people to sort of start searching, okay? But again, so searching ideally collectively, because it's no point sort of me finding something and Georgie finding exactly the same thing. We will have wasted our resources. So the idea is that in this chapter is how can we get people to share information? How can we get people to step up and search for solutions? In this case, some new pedagogical approach of how to be more inclusive at work. Business leaders, likewise. Many of you will have seen the news this week, only to say in France, for instance, that many people are lonely. I don't know if you saw this report by INSEE. Loneliness crisis is a huge looming crisis, okay? So again, business leaders, those of the business leaders who are aware of this are asking themselves, what can we do about it? Okay, there is no, so here, who can step up? It could be the employees, it could be the managers, it can be anyone, but there is a real challenge, and there's a question of who's going to step up and try to come up with test ideas. Okay, so again, there's no real incentive here. If it's going to work for your colleagues. You won't get any immediate personal reward for it. So it's this, how do we incentivize people to actually pick up societal challenges in a way to search for new solutions, knowing that there is no strong personal reward at stake. Industry leaders, well, this is again a big challenge that I know some of you are working on. Is how do you get people to set new standards? I mean, so business leaders, some businesses will have to invest resources, devote time in thinking through what those new standards will look like. Again, this is decentralized. It's voluntary. Okay, and the true challenge of this kind of problems is that there's a free riding problem. Okay, so we might just sit and wait and see if somebody else will pick up the problem and will search. So, in a nutshell, I think these are the kinds of innovations of which we need more of. And in the chapter, we actually draw on a publication we recently. Paper we recently published, where we actually can start thinking about what are the different ingredients for this kind of innovation to be more prominent, more prevailing. And so this is the last slide I want to show you, is basically there's a couple of things that we know from research that actually would incentivize and encourage more innovation for the public good. Okay, so let me just walk you through the left hand, and then we'll get to the topic of today is why do I believe that social economy organizations are truly important in helping us implement those strategies. So high-level strategies would be, well, we better start raising the stakes. Okay, so we don't quite understand, climate change. Well, the climate change challenge seems like a huge one, but still it seems quite distant. It's disconnected. We don't quite know. If I was going to change something about my, about how I commute to work, how I, thinking of new mobility practices, new transportation modalities, I'm not sure I actually know what the benefit of that is. We don't quite know what the stakes of innovation are. So I think this is a place where researchers can play a role, but also public sector can play a role in making that more salient. Actually, we might as well, you could put prices on this, but then again, it may actually crowd out some of the intrinsic motivation to search for the public good. But for sure, those stakes need to be clear. Okay, so that's the first recommendation. The second one is about boosting information sharing. So, and I know many of you actually work in this field and try to connect with other organizations who are active in the same, working around the same challenge, and I look at OECD and EU because that's exactly what you guys do. You often promote information sharing. You let best practices from Belgium go and speak in France and Germany and Spain. So it's this kind of the better we are at sharing information about what works, what doesn't, the better we will be at finding solutions to these kind of public good problems. Promoting pro-sociality, it's very, it's very economic in the sense that we know if I care about Christina and I think she cares about inequality, then the fact that she cares and I care and I integrate her caring will motivate me more. So maybe I lost you, but basically the idea is that if we are pro-social, if I integrate all the things that you care about, it's going to be motivating me more to search as well. Okay, so pro-sociality is at the heart of trying to get us to discover more of these innovations. And finally, and this may be a counterintuitive one, but we show in the paper, which was published in Management Science, we show that uncertainty, strangely enough, actually, the more uncertainty there is, the more higher the incentives there are to explore. So search efforts go up when uncertainty increases. Okay, so that's maybe the most counterintuitive one, but a very important one because, as we live in uncertain times, maybe there's hope that more of us will actually start searching. Now, very briefly on the right hand, and this is where I end in the chapter, is to say, okay, social economy organizations, why do I think they have something to contribute to the implementation of these strategies? And so when it comes to raising the stakes, I think there's a true challenge regarding narratives, framing of issues. And so I look at many of the people here in the audience who I believe have a real understanding of what kind of communication frames, what kind of narratives actually work. Okay, what narratives actually make us understand that this is an issue that we should act upon. So again, absolutely necessary for us to start acting. So it's very clear. If the narratives are not clear, if we have false beliefs about the nature of the problem, we will not be incentivized to act accordingly. The second role that I see many social economy organizations potentially picking up is creating those information platforms. In fact, many of you are already connected with other peer organizations and have figured out what it takes for people to contribute. In fact, we could learn from you because we have a real challenge. I would say at ESCP we might have a challenge of getting our students to really be generous and contributing information on our Blackboard platform, which is maybe the one you use to exchange with your students. So basically, there's a real challenge of how do you make information sharing something attractive? How do you get people to want to share their insights, also their failures, wanting to share information about things where they have searched, what has worked, what hasn't. And again, this is where I think social economy organizations can play a huge role. I also mentioned activating dormant knowledge. I'm not sure you are, we all think about this, but actually a lot of IP is unused. A lot of intellectual property rights never gets used, let alone gets applied in social domains, to purposes that actually contribute to the social good. So again, I see social economy organizations as a great broker to actually go and knock on the doors of technology holders and ask for licenses to implement new technologies that are underutilized and implement that for a social cause. And I think they have the legitimacy to do that better than anyone else. Fostering pro-sociality, again, this is maybe obvious, but many social economy organizations, just by creating volunteering opportunities, by, I think about Croix-Rouge, Française, just by connecting people, we know that our pro-sociality goes up. Okay, so if we are connected with people who are different from us, actually that triggers pro-sociality. And again, in the paper, we can show mathematically and experimentally that once pro-sociality goes up, people will be more likely to experiment and explore for innovations for the public good. And lastly, this notion of uncertainty acceptance. We've all gone through the COVID crisis, and so all of a sudden we were hit by these tremendous uncertainties about what do we, you know, how will the world look like tomorrow? And I think maybe this is again something that we could look and learn from social economy organizations, how to actually be more accepting to uncertainty, not hide uncertainty, but actually accept it. This is maybe the way this is maybe the characteristic that will shape our society in the coming 2-3 years. And once we accept uncertainty, again, it's going to trigger more innovation. Once we accept the humility, once we take a stance of, we probably don't know everything, then again, that is going to promote more of an innovation stance. Okay, so that just is actually in a nutshell the chapter that is in the book, and there's many more and many cool chapters in the book, but I guess I felt legitimate just to walk you through that one only. But thanks for your attention, and I think now is the time to welcome the panelists and take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Marieke. Thank you, Jordi. It's a real pleasure to be here today. Thank you all for joining. My name is Christina Tora. I am Chief Market Development Officer at the GSG. The GSG is a non-profit organization based out of the UK. Our mission is actually very aligned to the topic today, is to build impact economies. So we work with 42 countries and a couple more countries all around the world to help drive more capital towards social and environmental good. And basically what we do is to help the different ecosystem players in the economies to come together, co-create national strategies for impact, and then apply them through policy action and new innovative solutions, such as financial solutions to finance social and environmental good. It's a true pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much. It's an absolute fabulous panel that we have here. I've been in this sector for almost 20 years, and I can tell you that you have here some of the leaders of very different kinds of institutions, kinds of organizations, so it's going to be an interesting conversation. I'm very much looking forward to it. So I would like to welcome them, introduce the panel, and let's get started. So we have Amal Chevreau-Baïj, who's Senior Policy Analyst for Social Economy and Innovation at the OECD. We have Jacques Berger, Director at the Action Tank of HEC, the Action Tank Entreprise et Pauvreté, merci, at HEC. François Doria, Policy Officer for Social Finance Policy and Investment at the European Commission. And Guillaume Desnaux, President of the Communauté des Entreprises à Mission and co-founder of Allenvie, Compagnie and Bien Commun. So welcome so much. It's fabulous to have you here. So I will ask you, if that's okay, I will ask you a number of questions. I'm very curious to hear from you, and I think that the rest of the auditorium as well. So I would like to ask you to be as concise as possible. Illustrate your statements with examples so that everyone can try to relate to what you're saying. And yeah, let's try to cover as many topics as possible, and at the end we'll leave you some time for questions. So just before we start, and adding a little bit to the fabulous context that you've heard just now, let's see why and let's see how the social economy matters. So that will be my first question to you. It already matters. 7% of global GDP is produced by the social economy. In the EU, it's 2.8 million social economy enterprises employing on average 6% of European workers, and in some countries it's nearly 10% of workers. So it's really a significant part of our economies, of our societies. So my first question to each of you is, if you had to use one word, think about one word, to define why social economy matters, what would you say and why? Amal.
Well, that's a hard one. I would say inclusion, because of many reasons, because of the reasons that Marika and Georgie spoke about in their introductory remarks, and because social economy organizations are very, very inclusive in many, many ways. And also, when I mean inclusive of people, inclusive of places, inclusive of ideas, of solutions, and so on. So I'm going to stop right here, because I don't think I'll be concise if you let me go.
Okay, inclusion, first word. Guillaume.
I would say purpose, because I think that social economy shows us that you can create meaningful and fulfilling ventures, organizations with a real purpose, which is to solve social issues, environmental issues, and the goal of a business has not to be to make money. It can be something else, and I think that's what also we can retain, and that we can get inspired by this from the social economy.
Brilliant. Okay. It's getting harder and harder.
Yes, it's getting very hard, because actually I was thinking about the scale, and you gave very good figures, but it's interesting to look at it in relative terms. It means as many people working for the social economy in the EU than in the construction industry. Then in Spain you would have as many people working in tourism than in the social economy. So there is really an element of scale. Cohesion, inclusion, I mean, we've seen it in many crises that we've gone through. The ability of the social economy to bring people together in a society where there are growing inequalities and antagonism, and values, purpose. Basically, I think if everybody is looking at the social economy today, is that because it embodies all what people expect: purpose before profit, participation. So they won the battle of values after 20 years of a lot of liberalism. Good luck.
Thank you. I think social economy can solve problems that neither the public authorities or the traditional ways of tackling poverty, for example, nor traditional company can solve. So I believe in a kind of hybrid approach of social economy, and from my point of view, we can bring solution to complexity.
Brilliant. Thank you. This was a perfect introduction. So maybe let's go in the opposite direction. I would love to hear from you a little bit more on what you see in your, day-to-day work, how you see it materialize, how you see social economy come to life.
I don't know if I understood right your question. What I see, I started working in 1990. I was graduated from HEC in 1990, so it was the end of USSR, and my whole career happened in a world where market economy was the solution, democracy was a kind of end of history, and we basically stopped thinking. We were just in pure execution, and I think that it is what is very interesting, what I can witness for the past 10 years, is that we have started to think again and to bring new solutions, to consider in different ways boundaries that were, frozen. So this is what I witness, and I can witness it because I work with large corporations, with public authorities, with local NGO, with academics. So this is what I can testify.
And maybe if we go a little bit further, can I ask you for one example for people who may be not familiar with your work at the Action Tank? Because I think it's a really brilliant way to really bring these communities together on very concrete problems and find solutions to them.
Yeah, the basic idea that the creator of this incubator had in mind was the fact that poverty was staggering in a country like France. So we could consider that poverty was not increasing, but the feeling of precarity was increasing. And it had political and sociological huge consequences. And their intuition was that the root cause for that was the increase of what we call pre-engaged expenses in the household, housing, insurance, etc. So we had hundreds, thousands, millions of households who were not poor in technical terms when you consider poverty by the revenue, but by the 20 of each month they were short of money. They could not go on holidays. So, and the traditional way of tackling this kind of situation was not to bring them social welfare because they were not asking for that. So we had to invent a new way to tackle, so not to increase their revenue, but to decrease their expenses and some categories of expenses. And we could not do that by a philanthropic approach, a traditional philanthropic approach. So we had to put in the same room the large companies that were putting those key basic products and services on the market. Each of them had their foundation, tackling some issues, but in limited scale. And we wanted to elaborate a systemic answer to that question of pre-engaged expenses. So we had in the room the large company, some public authorities, some local NGO, and we tried to elaborate using the efficiency of those companies. So those big, large corporations, they had proven that they were very efficient at bringing with large scale some key products and services on the market, and we could leverage on their scalability, their capacity to bring those products at different market conditions for selected household. And this is because we put in the same room those large companies, some public authorities, some NGOs, and some academics, that we could elaborate and design solutions and then test them and then started the scalability of the solution. So this is very concrete. And we have some program with 200,000 beneficiaries with no public fundings, and everybody is happy.
So we heard again scale. So maybe moving back to you, François, you mentioned scale before. So perhaps can you reflect on the momentum that you're seeing from the EU perspective on social economy, examples that illustrate the movement or the evolution that have been happening in the past couple of years?
I think a major milestone that might not be done enough is a council recommendation, which was published at the end of last year. So it might sound like, oh yes, it's one of those EU bizarre things, but it's actually And it might be, but no, actually it's not. What the Council recommendation is that 27 members agree that they should have a strategy for the social economy, that each member state should actually define what they are going to do to support the social economy, and to report on this strategy every 2 years. And I think this creates this type of dynamics that is very typical of the development of EU policies. Is that you will have this form of, Marike was talking about raising the stakes. We are at council level. We have a strategy. We exchange on our strategy, and because we do it in a synchronized and such important framework, that's where political momentum can be built. So I really think it's a major milestone, especially, and that it's needed for this sector, which is characterized by a form of fragmentation, and that is shaped by very distinct historical, cultural, whatever, I mean, you name it, frameworks. So for me, yes, the most important element just happened 1 month ago.
Well, I was going to ask actually Amal about the UN resolution to take the picture even broader from the EU to even larger perspective. Last April, there was a UN resolution on social economy. You also work on policy and with governments on these issues. What do you see? Is there momentum? What's your assessment of the trends?
Well, actually, there is also an OECD recommendation on the social and solidarity economy. And going back to your question of what I have witnessed, for instance, in my line of work, is first of all interest in something called the social economy, increased interest. The social economy has been around in many countries for centuries sometimes, but still a lot of people didn't know what the social economy is until 5 or 6 years. But then for some reason, and I do agree definitely with what's in the book, which is to embrace uncertainty, because COVID created such a huge uncertainty, and in somehow social economy organizations were such good respondent to urgent needs of people, bringing help, helping even sometimes in many countries, local and national authorities bring these solutions to people who were confined, as we were all. There is increased interest, and increased interest in 2 lines, which is one on the policy side, and this is very technical, so I'm not going to bore everyone with that, which is to put in place what we call the framework conditions. Because if you want social economy to thrive even more, of course you have to leave the spontaneous element of social economy go on, but you need, as a policymaker, to put in place what's needed to help it go on and do its work, which is maybe legal frameworks, maybe money, and that money has to be tailored to the needs of these organizations, maybe access to markets and so on. So you have what we call 6 or 9 framework conditions that are very important. But what's more important than framework conditions is the interest in social economy contributing to sectors. Again, a lot of people say, well, it's a small sector, it doesn't create that much employment. I mean, you've given figures, but I think today the interest in many countries, and you've asked for examples. I was, for instance, in Ireland. In Ireland, they have identified, for instance, specific roles for social enterprises in many of their very important strategies, such as the strategy for circular economy, the strategy for integrating people with disabilities, and so on. And these contributions are extremely important to even bring social economy to the mainstream. So what I would say to end up what I had to say, which is that we have witnessed, at least for the last, I would say 10 to 15 years, bring in more of a social economy to the mainstream. And this is done through public policies, through also recognizing the fact that people can create their own solutions, but local authorities or authorities in general are there to help, to support, and to bring the kind of conditions that help people experiment more. But I can go into great detail about what each country does, at least in the OECD. And the UN, you've asked me specifically about the UN. The UN gave like a global, like a worldwide type of legitimacy for this sector. And it has been doing so for a while. It has even a UN task force. There is even a UN task force on the social economy where OECD and other institutions are member. So I think we've created a momentum, and the change is that now social economy is not something that people look at from very outside. It's pretty much something that's coming to center stage in many places.
So that's really brilliant. So we moving from kind of a high policy perspective to you, Guillaume. You wear different hats, which I think are very relevant to this conversation. Both the entrepreneur hat and kind of president of the Communauté des entreprises à mission, which represent a number of different kinds of businesses. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you see?
Yeah, so a small summary about Société à Mission, because perhaps everybody doesn't know everything about it. So Société à Mission, it's not a legal form, it's a legal framework. In French, we call it a qualité de Société à Mission. It was created by the Loi Pacte in 2019, and it enables any company, which can be a very classical business or a company from the social economy. Any company can include in its bylaws a mission. So it's a raison d'être, so a sentence that explains the purpose of the company. And then it should be completed with social and environmental goals that are written in the bylaws. And then once it's done, the company has to create a mission committee, which is a group of people representing the whole stakeholders that will actually make sure that the company put means and get results for this mission. And then you have a third party, which is called an organisme tiers indépendant in French, that will audit, control the company every 2 years and make sure results are achieved for the mission. It's an interesting movement because right now in France there are 1,400 Sociétés à Mission, 3.5 years after the law has been implemented. And within these companies you can find big companies like Danone, Maïf, Crédit Mutuel, and small companies like mine, companies from all sectors and all geographies. What does it mean for our discussion today? First, I think that it's interesting because for me, social economy it can be understood in two, especially if you hear economy in French. Economy in French can mean a group of players within the whole economy. It can also mean economics, so the science behind economics. And I think that the ambition of Société à Mission is to actually help social economy to make the economy more social and make the economics more social. So the goal of the legal framework is to enable any player to actually drive more impact through its activities. And we see it in various ways. You have some companies in my field, for example, in the elderly care sector, that will have very ambitious actions to finally improve working conditions of employees, which is something very important in my sector because we don't even manage to attract people anymore. You see people in the, for example, in the food business that will invest a lot in partnerships with their suppliers to develop regenerative agriculture. Danone does it, Bell as well. So you see this kind of collaboration that you can actually perhaps usually see more ecosystem collaboration. That's something that I think, Marike, you thought about, that is more frequently observed within the social economy. So I think the boundaries of the social economy are actually getting wider, which is a very good thing, because it can be also a bit, I think, dangerous to glorify a social economy and say, hey, it's 10% of the GDP, but then it has been 10% of the GDP for decades now in France, and it can also last for years. But the question also is to make sure the whole economy actually changes. And I will just end up with an historical step back. I think that the first time the term social economy, économie sociale, was coined, it was in France at the end of the 19th century by French economists. And one of them was actually among the guys who managed the 1900 Paris exposition, so the world exhibition that was visited by 48 million people, I think, a bit more than the number of people we can reach on LinkedIn, all of us today. And at this exhibition on the Champ de Mars, there was one building dedicated to économie sociale. It was written on it. There were more than 5,000 exhibitors. And within these exhibitors, a big part of them, at least a third, were companies. Like a third were non-profit organizations, a third were public initiatives, and a third were initiatives from companies. And all these initiatives were aimed at reducing basically poverty among workers, which was a big issue at the end of the 19th century. And I think that what it shows us is that even in the past, this inclusive view of social economy was already vibrant, and I think that's something we should pursue to make sure social economy is not, in France we say cornerisé, so I would say cornerized in English.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Guillaume, for the historic perspective, and actually it's a nice bridge to my next question. It's been around for a long time. We've achieved a lot. There is momentum. It's happening in a lot, if not every country, in diverse ways, many sectors, and maybe we can dive further into which sectors and examples. But it still remains an idea or an ideal. You were talking about mainstreaming. How do we get there? What are the challenges that are still existing that you see? How do we tackle those challenges? What are the most important leverages that we can activate to really truly transform our societies to become social economies? Who wants to start?
It's a very difficult question, but what I wanted to say, listening to Jacques and Guillaume, is that I think currently what's the most interesting is what's happening at the borders, at the edges, which always triggers a lot of discussion. But developing the social economy, we need to develop the social economy, but it's as interesting to look at how we develop the social economy as what the social economy develops beyond the boundaries of the social economy. The examples of collaborations that Jacques was giving, the Société à Mission, it shows that basically at some stage we had this paradigm shift where the social economy becomes an inspirer, and corporates look at it, public authorities look at it, and when they start to collaborate, it creates super interesting things. And why? Because probably the social economy has always been the most daring sector in terms of thinking, in terms of why am I doing this? How should I be doing instead of what? And so you look at, I think in public policy, you clearly see that the state now has different forms of collaborations with associations. You see how corporates engage with association, how social economy structures inspires evolution of corporate. That's what we need to look at. There are many examples in France, this beautiful country. But clearly, for instance, social impact bonds. It's been an initiative created by, a long time initiative, but relaunched by the French a lot. And it's a typical framework of collaboration between investors, public authorities to encourage social innovation. That's super. There are a lot of public policies in France, like Territoire Zéro Chômeur de Longue Durée, or the Plan Mentorat, which are very interesting in the approach. Basically, Mentorat is a kind of social innovation that has been around for 10 years, and there was a bottom-up approach in policy development with a few associations coming together and then realizing that there was 70 associations doing the same thing, and then the state saying, there are 70 associations doing this, and what are they doing? And how many people they reach? And how can I steer this? So, a totally different approach, and now you have a plan, evaluation, etc. So we see this, and that's for me, and there is a common language that is also a lot, which is impact measurement, which, social innovation, how do we assess, measure what we do, not to punish, but to progress and to continue to collaborate.
Okay, great. So we are adding multi-stakeholder collaborations and impact measurement to the defining factors of social economy. Perhaps those are your, solutions for progressing more? Or do you want to add any challenges that, from your perspective, you see at the EU level that would really, add a shift?
Amar discussed the framework conditions. It's extremely. It's very often hindering the development of the social economy because it's very often small within something that was not shaped for this. At the same time, it's a huge opportunity, and there are a lot of in terms of progress, of scale, of development, and there are a lot of experiences across member states that really need, and that's the work the OECD is doing a lot. I think there are a lot major bottlenecks in terms of financing that we try to address, but which probably, we're working on that, but probably need more innovative instruments, blending grants and traditional financing. We already, the EU has this EU social window which finance microfinance enterprises, social infrastructure with 2.7 billion. We do it with guarantees. We do what triggers private investment, what is going to engage other stakeholders, and we continue to work on that with going beyond in terms of blending, etc. And I think financing in terms of opportunities is very important, and capacity building, entrepreneurship.
Do you see the same? I see you're nodding.
Yes, I do agree that. And first of all, I encourage people who are in the room today, if they want to learn more about what OECD does on the social economy, to go on our website. We have done so much work for the last 25 years, but I would say even the last 5 years we've done so much to make people understand the value, what social economy can bring and everything. Having said that, I liked your questions because this last question because of two things. First of all, I think social economy is innovating in many ways. For instance, if you take something called platform cooperatives, that's something that's extremely innovative. Bring in the cooperative model to digital tools, that's something very creative, and we have seen that even if it's still a small phenomenon, but it's bringing solutions to many problems, such as how to minimize negative externalities on places, how to provide better working conditions, and so on. So, I mean, the innovations are big, and the space or the potential for innovation through this sector is very big. Having said that, there are things also that social economy should still work on, and it's not all rosy. I mean, I refer to one of the projects I worked on personally, which is the participation, for instance, of women in the sector. This is a sector where women work a lot. In many countries, the workforce of the social economy is typically female, more than 60%, sometimes more than 70%. They tend to work in what we call, since COVID, essential sectors: care, education, and so on. I mean, we've discovered in 2020 that those were essential sectors. They've always been essential, by the way. So, but at the same time, everything associated with female work in the social economy is associated with these sectors. It's as if social economy didn't make enough space for women to go to other sectors where social economy is present as well, like agriculture, like other sectors where maybe there's use more of technology. So, and women in social economy, although they go into that sector for many reasons, and you can read the report and it's well explained, it's still very difficult for them to get into management positions, for instance. So these are things that the sector still needs to work on, and this links to the framework conditions I was talking about. The second element is youth. A lot of young people, and I think we are here in a place, although this is a business school, but I think a lot of people today, a lot of young people aspire to careers with a sense of purpose. They want to go into business with purpose and so on. And social economy is a wonderful vehicle for that. But they have two hurdles, and funnily enough, one of them is being their age. Because they're young, and because they have these very fantastic ideas of doing business with purpose, a lot of bankers don't believe in their ideas. So they end up not pursuing these careers because they lack opportunities, they lack funding. So it all goes back to what François was saying, and we have seen that in many countries. Today, and I can speak to other contexts, for instance, in Brazil, in Colombia, in other places, or what we call the Deep South, the social economy now is seen as a vehicle to formalize activity, for instance, or to formalize work, and to help people get decent working and decent living conditions. So what I'm saying is there are a lot of good things that this sector is given and will give, and bring in more social innovation. And I look in the audience to one of my colleagues who works also on that. Creating space for more social innovations through social economy is a good thing because it can bring a lot of solutions. But at the same time, let's not just say that everything is wonderful. There are things that need to be worked on, and this is the work of the stakeholders themselves, but also the governments and policy action in general. Sorry if I was long.
No, it's great. Thank you, Amal. I think you gave a really broad perspective on different issues that we need to look at. Perhaps coming to you, Guillaume, you were the one calling us out on, all of this is great, but it's still not enough. What barriers, challenges do you see? What would you like to see progress?
Well, I think there is not one thing that needs to be changed and then the whole system is going to be better. It's a systemic change that we are right now, I think, experiencing. So some people are experiencing new legal frameworks. Other people are working a lot on new impact measurements. Some people are working on cultural changes. I think all these changes are going to complete themselves and create a systemic change. So that would be my first answer. But then I think that what is key is changing the culture, changing narratives, changing role models. And yeah, just a small story about this, which I found interesting, because some companies belong to social economy but forgot about it. I was once invited to a training day for executives in a big bank named BPCE. So it's a merge of two banks in France, Banque Populaire and Caisse d'Épargne. So I was invited as a social entrepreneur to tell them about social entrepreneurship. And they told me, it's great what you do, but you know, we are a bank. You are working in the elderly care field, so it's natural for you to be a social entrepreneur, to be a purpose-driven company, but we are a bank, so it's not the same for us. And I told them that your two banks, one of them was founded by a priest in the 19th century that wanted to help small businesses to get loans. And the other one, Caisse d'Épargne, was created by a social entrepreneur in the beginning of the 19th centuries who created a philanthropic limited company, which is something he even invented at that time and wasn't used after because it doesn't exist anymore. It's a framework that doesn't exist anymore, but he created as this unique framework, and the goal was to help poor people to get access to the banking system. So you are more a social business than I am, and you're asking me to tell you about social business. So that's and banking is an example, but you can find, I think, in their roots, many companies can see values that they can use again today, and we also need to redefine role models, thanks to history, but also today, perhaps to promote new kind of leaderships with leaders that are more able to care about their employees than being rich and successful in the 500 challenge or 500 Forbes ranking, yearly ranking.
Yes. I see you wanted to react, Jack.
Yeah, very simply, I think large corporations need more purpose because in the long run, they won't recruit talent if they're lacking purpose. So they have to redefine why do they exist. And they do not exist to make top management obscenely rich. They do not exist to generate EBITDA only. It is necessary and their efficiency is necessary, but they do not, it is not a raison d'être. NGO need efficiency. They have plenty of purpose, but they need efficiency. And public authorities and political, politique publique, they need to, all the public policies are driven by a principle which is, if I put more money in that, for that issue, it's better. But if a problem can be solved by more money, it is not a problem. It's a matter of priority. So and to summarize, I would say the accounting system has been invented by Italians 5 centuries ago, and it has not changed that much. So it give account of a very small part of reality. So we have to think more to create more accountability for what a large company creates and destroy. So, and I think this is happening. And I think also the public budget and public policy need more a very strong innovation in how do they give account of why do I choose this kind of policy instead of that one. And it is not only a matter of more money or less money. So it's less sexy, accountability, but I think it is very important because it shows how we have been able to work in a space with very limited indicators and pixels to account for it.
Yeah, just one word. I think it's a huge paradox because we have, as entrepreneurs, we have to produce innovation. It's the thing we hear the most. But as you say, we are very conservative in the tools we use to innovate. So accounting norms could be understood. An accountant from Italy in the 16th century could read your balance sheet. A French lawyer from the 19th century could understand the way your legal framework works. So it's really schizophrenic, I think, to be so much focused on producing innovation and not accepting that we also need innovation in the frameworks we use.
François, you wanted to react as well?
Yes, just I fully agree, and it's true that I think we are really getting. I mean, it's exactly as Jacques was describing earlier. His life. I mean, we stayed for a very long period after the fall of the Berlin Wall. We lived on the assumption that globalization, deregulation, knowledge economy would trigger innovation, competitiveness, prosperity will solve problems, and this wonderful connected world, we will be closer and best friends. And to a certain extent, it works. I mean, there are some results in terms of reduction of poverty, etc. But what we've seen, I think, starting with the financial crisis up to COVID, is that this way of thinking has exposed us to major vulnerabilities, inequalities, and that we really need to change the mindset. That business is not business, business is responsibility, impact. And as Guillaume and Jacques were saying on the framework, for once we should cheer Europe with this unprecedented pace of regulatory change on corporate sustainable reporting, on sustainable finance disclosure. We are going to ask companies to report on their not only on their business, but on their sustainability risk and impacts. And we link that to how investors take the strategy into account and report to people who are citizens as well. So obviously, this is very young. This is it can be, it's but it's a dramatic change, and it's been quick, it's been deep, and there is also that I was discussing with him, the due diligence directive, corporate due diligence directive. We are going to say when a company has a duty to identify and to mitigate breach to human rights and ecological damage, and it can be liable, including at director level. So I think this change happen in a context of political momentum. It's what people want. It's probably part of our identity, and it's very deep. It's messy, but it's very deep.
Let's hope that with the next European elections, we still keep this amazing momentum and leadership from Europe. I'm hopeful. I hope you are too. Amal, maybe just a final comment, and then we can move to...
Yes. Just one last thing. I think that on exactly what François was saying, is social economy can bring a lot. And what we didn't mention in the discussion so far is the governance. Because I think what's distinctive of social economy is the governance model, is how decisions are taken within these organizations, how profit is made and how profit is used and to what purpose it is used. And I think for this is something maybe that social economy could bring to the corporate conventional world a little bit more, because all what you're saying, plus sustainability, because that wasn't an issue a long time ago, but for many social economy organizations, that was already a concern. I think there is a lot of bridges to build.
It's a great point, Amal. Governance is definitely something that we can learn from the social economy, and we should learn from the social economy. I'm going to open up to questions. We have maybe 10 minutes to have a Q&A with the room. So I suggest maybe that if you have a question, you stand up. We have someone wonderful who's going to,
Give me a microphone.
to pass on a microphone. Please introduce yourself and ask your question briefly, so maybe we can take several questions. Contributions, maybe. Well, I see some businesses, I see some investors, I see some practitioners, researchers. Also, yes.
We're not that. So I'm Christine. Question: Do you think the comité à mission, or is there any chance that the entreprise à mission and comité à mission will be a little more widespread or beyond the French borders and go, for example, as a EU sort of framework or even OCDE? I mean, just OECD. I mean, that's just a pending question. Sorry, it's very precise, but
there are already other movements in other countries. There is a comparable kind of framework in Italy and Spain, and we are right at this moment discussing with them and doing some advocacy together. That was one of the purpose of my discussion with François before the panel. So yes, obviously we think that Société à Mission could become, or not, perhaps not with this name, but the same kind of framework should become something that is used by default by European businesses. That would be great and very complementary to the regulation that is very normative, and the new kind of governance. It doesn't cover everything that the legal forms cover, but the new kind of governance and legal framework is a tool that can really foster the companies and the leadership teams accountability, responsibility. So I think it's complementary to regulation that sometimes can be a bit, I would say, normative.
Thank you. Thanks, Guillaume. Oh, wow, okay. 2 more questions. Or 3 more questions. Let's take the 3 questions and then we try to address them very briefly.
Hi, I'm Justin Moffitt. I am a PhD student at HEC. On that last question, in the United States, we have benefit corporations, and so that's our legal framework that is also internationalized. But having tried to start my own benefit corporation, and as a practicing lawyer, I realized these regulations can be quite burdensome and confusing, and I'm a corporate lawyer myself. And so I'm wondering what you see as the role of the state to kind of bridge the gap between, even if people want to start these social enterprises, there's a knowledge gap, there's a practice, like expertise gap, there's a financial gap in terms of being able to hire the financial accountants that you need, to be able to hire the corporate lawyers that you need to navigate these regulations. So what's the role of the state or the role of NGOs to kind of fill that gap?
Great question, thank you. We have 1 question in the back and also 1 over here in the middle.
It's back.
Hi, I'm Roshni. I'm a recent graduate from ESCP. I have a more general question. Amal, since you mentioned that youth can sometimes be a barrier in itself for young people to enter the social economy space, you and all of the panelists, do you have any advice for young people who are interested in getting into this area?
Thank you. And then the final question over here. So I'm being told that we need to leave the room. So so we're taking the questions because they're really interesting. Maybe we just do a one-sentence conclusion and we leave. Is that okay for everyone? And we continue in the cocktail. Sorry, of course, we continue the conversation, the very rich conversation, but at the next space.
Good evening. I'm working in a new branch of UM6P University of Moroccan University here. My question is regarding the question raised by Jacques regarding the accounting system, and also you talked about the efficiency of the big companies based on KPIs. So the problem, I think, is how could we deal with this? How can we go forward on changing the accounting system and the KPIs used? Because if we don't begin to work on this, maybe we will not make it happen.
Okay, one sentence per person. Oh my God.
I would just say that in France and in Europe, the governments could put as much effort as they put in creating tech ecosystem. If they put the same level of efforts in creating social economy ecosystems, I think it could produce results and help young entrepreneurs to create great social businesses.
For the young people here, be persistent, and I think go see the right people who can understand your line of business. That's what I would say.
I'm tempted to say, shall we go to have a drink? No, that cannot be the conclusion. No, I think I think what we are discussing is basically one of the brightest posts on the brightest part of the economy and the society in its transition, and we need that because we are living uncertain times with a lot of tensions, and there is hope on the other side, I think.
Yeah, and provocatively, I would say that the climate transition is a fantastic opportunity to reassess many boundaries. And I would love to be 20 right now, because I would have to use my brain.